Chapter 3. Two Tales. The sun was already high in the sky, the morning's frost pools and puddles under paw. Beneath Felix's feet, the cobblestone road cut through the rolling hills of the lowlands and disappeared under the shadow of the soaring snow-topped mountains in the north. A singular gap in that imposing geography allowed travel between the country of Spire and the fractured lands, exactly where Felix was taking them. He squinted. "You think we're going the right way?" There was only a mute response. Nothing from the dog sorcerer, and only a blank smile from his ever-trusty Fairweather. Heroes came in all shapes and sizes, and in the case of Fairweather, that shape was fluffy, immense, and a little dumb. Although he was as big as a Bernard, Fairweather was a golden retriever through and through, and a loyal one at that. In Felix's eyes, Fairweather was the real hero. He carried all the gear, travelled the distance, and never gave a single complaint. Stories would tell of Felix's magnificent feats, but none would tell of Fairweather's concrete fortitude or unwavering support. A loyal companion, man and FurKnight's best friend. Felix eyed the prisoner sat astride the saddle, his paws bound and head hung low. Not at all menacing, but Felix wasn't fooled. It was risky, and he didn't like it. Sorcerers were bad news, that's what his old quartermaster used to say. Bayspire was full of alchemists, healers, doctors, and quacks, but their miracles were practical, explainable, and often believable. What he'd seen the night before verged on the impossible, and had far-reaching implications. Imagine being able to manipulate stone as easily as the sorcerer had manipulated fire. "I will build the most beautiful fortress ever seen," he thought, "full of patterns and curves and spiral towers. The impossible made material." His tail wagged. The beat of hooves in the distance broke Felix from his daydream, his nerves running cold. He turned his attention to the sorcerer's bound paws and the greatsword strapped to Fairweather's side, covering them with loose blankets and strategically placed utensils, a pan upon the scabbard, a jacket over the hilt. The sorcerer questioned him with a raised eyebrow, but Felix battered it away. Fewer details, fewer questions. The horse and rider came to a sliding stop, reins pulled tight. They cast a long shadow over the group, a dark storm of polished plate upon a warhorse in glossy leather. Long ribbons flowed from the horse's head in blue and gold, dancing in the cool air, the colours of a grand knight, a shiv. Felix slid a paw under the jacket and gripped the hilt of his sword. "Hail, Shiv! Hail, FurKnight!" They traded raised fists, the Spirian salute. "State your business." Felix tried to picture the orders on the walls of the enclave barracks, their curly words and needlessly strict policies, yet the knowledge eluded him. "Felix FurKnight of the Bayspire FurKnight, heading north to the breach for winter's deployment. And your companion? This is my squire pup." Felix patted the dog sorcerer on the back, but he continued to stare into the middle distance, giving nothing away. "Do you have papers of deployment?" "Of course. Somewhere in all these packs." Felix swept a paw over the vast number of leather satchels strapped to Fairweather and shrugged. The knight held his gaze as the wind blew between them, and after a brief silence, reached out a heavy gauntlet. Felix squeezed the hidden greatsword hilt and returned a forced smile. "Just a minute." There were papers in there somewhere, he just wasn't exactly sure where. Pieces of thick parchment decorated with beautiful squiggles. Of course, he could have always chosen the second option, but after the kerfuffle the night before, he wasn't quite in the mood for violence. They'd garnered enough attention on their journey already. He feigned digging into Fairweather's deep packs, his body half submerged, and spoke over his shoulder. "Is that a Bayspire Destria?" The knight softened. "Only the finest. It was my father's, and now it is mine. The very finest." He steered the horse around at a slow trot. "I didn't expect you to have an eye for horses, dog." Felix looked up. "I've cleaned my fair share of stables." The rider's shadow passed by once more before coming to a halt. The horse stomped and snorted, and the knight patted it for calm. "I gather this is your first deployment?" Felix took his paws out of his packs, patted them together to remove some non-existent dust, then turned. The man was beaming a bleach-white smile back at him, as if his deduction had been some kind of significant victory. Exactly as Felix had expected. Pandering to the nobility was always the perfect distraction. "I can always tell a pup from a hound," chuckled the Shiv. He was the portrait of a nobleman, clean-shaven, wide-jawed, and with sun-kissed hair. Felix knew the type. "You ride this road often?" "Of course." The Shiv gave him another broad smile and a theatrical bow. "Colin Beresford, son of Lord Beresford, keeper of the books and overseer of the great library. But surely you already knew this." Felix nodded in blank agreement, let the man continue. "This is my road, from bay to breach. You could say I'm His Majesty's northern arm, carrying the orders, collecting the taxes, and taking news from castle to court. I'm one of the few knights not sitting idle on the Western Front, actually playing an active role in the security and safety of the kingdom. Sounds important. Oh, it is. The warhorse steered and lurched again before falling into a slow trot to circle them. Remind me, FurKnight, what is your creed? Felix followed the horse and rider as they closed in tighter. Be brave, then move forward? Ah, yes, that's the one. And with that, the horse and rider thundered down the road, leaving them standing alone on the cobblestones, dashed with dirt and snow. Felix watched on as they faded into the distance. Shivs. All assholes and egotists. And that's just the nice ones. You did good, Fairweather. Brave as ever. The mountain of fluff panted a wide smile and wagged his tail. They hadn't walked more than 50 feet before the rain began to bother Felix's nose, and the dark clouds above started to speak in guttural tones. He placed a paw to his temple and tried to see through the solidifying haze. Across a field, on the edge of a small thicket, stood an old stone building, offering shelter from the approaching storm. He pulled Fairweather by the reins and dashed, getting wetter and wetter with every step. The shadowed building was overgrown and empty, with a large oak tree rooted in one corner that gave it an evergreen roof and a dry interior. What do you think? Said Felix. The gold dog shook himself dry, almost throwing their sorcerer free as his pots and pans hammered a merry tune. Felix addressed the prisoner. Jump down. This storm ain't stopping any time soon. They stayed sullen and silent, but Felix shrugged it off. Soon he would be at the breach and studying under Barnabas FurKnight. There would be stories and tales, sparring and training, a little drink and some genuine heroics. He could live his life protecting the realm and its people. Conversation, he reckoned, wouldn't be hard to come by. Within minutes, he had a small fire burning and some bacon-wrapped sausages in a pan, and with the food sizzling, he turned his attention to their temporary accommodation. You know, this building must have been beautiful once. He walked the circumference of the room, running a paw along the walls, cutting patches of moss and water with his claws. You can see it in the sharpness of the edges and the polish of the stone. They really knew what they were doing. It's impressive. He swept a paw across the horizon. There are sites like this all along the coast, built by some ancient civilization. I wonder what happened to them. People never change. The sorcerer spoke in his high, timid voice, for the first time since Far Corner. They always want something, then they want something more. They overreach and they disappear. Burn too bright, then burn out completely. Felix beamed a private smile. Conversation at last. The sorcerer had used an interesting choice of words given what had happened the night before, but that hadn't stopped an array of questions flaring into Felix's mind. How did he know magic? Where had he come from? Given that he wasn't a FurKnight, how could he stand and talk? It was all so dangerous, but he needed to know more. I don't see any evidence of burn marks or burst seams, said Felix. I say this building grew old and died of natural causes, if I said all possible for a building to do. The dog eased to his feet, his paws still bound, then walked to one of the 3 broken walls. You are not wrong. It surely is very old. He gestured to several faded markings on the walls. Have you ever seen writings like this before? They looked like little square drawings, each containing a group of geometric shapes. Felix considered them. If this language has no record, then these people must have disappeared, burnt from all history. Exactly. The rain tapped on the canopy and filled the long silence before Felix rolled the dice. Where does your magic come from? The dog delivered a piercing stare before looking into the fire. I speak, and they listen. The fire, the water, the earth and the air. But it is no science. They are fickle and alive, and when they wake, they have their own agendas. Is that why you did what you did to the miner? Perhaps. The fire wants to burn, and the water wants to drown. These things are not entirely within my power to control. They have wills of their own. He stared into the flames. But make no mistake, I wanted that man dead. Felix's legs locked still. The sorcerer just admitted to murder. Cran killed your brother, your family, so maybe you could plead some form of self-defense, some kind of injustice. I plead nothing. The fire flared and crackled. That man wanted something he could not have, a cure for the incurable. He killed someone I loved, and I burned him for it. People are all the same, FurKnight, and if you spend your life trying to protect them, then you are a fool. You will die a fool for it. That stung. Felix had vowed to protect those who could not protect themselves. It wasn't foolish. It was honourable, knightly. The right thing to do. I've met many kind people. You had your Brer and I have my king. These are people worth fighting for. Isn't that why you burned the man? Out of love? Out of grief? This appeared to invoke some thought in his captive, and the rain dominated their conversation for a while, the wind shaking the canopy above. You lit a fire, knowing what I could do. The dog sorcerer stepped forward, the thin rope around his wrists falling apart. You gave me no gag, and you cannot tie a knot to save your life. So when I say you are a fool, FurKnight, know that you are indeed a fool, and soon to be a dead one. He whispered a silent word, and a wisp of flame leapt from the fire to rest in his open paw. Brown eyes met green. Felix reached for his knife, and the room galvanized in his mind. The knife in his palm, ready to be thrown, the pan of hot oil and meats, a weapon if used right, fair weather and the gear only a few bounds away, the great sword ready to be drawn. He didn't feel like a fool. And yet, here we are, with nowhere else to go. The flame went out as the dog closed his fist, the growls of two empty stomachs, diluting the tension in the clearing. Felix scowled. Fool or no, I helped your Brer in far corner. You did? The dog yawned wide. And that is why I will not kill you today. It was all so risky, and the sooner he detained this anomaly, the better. But first, as always, there would be breakfast. 2 sausages or 3? 3. They sat on opposite sides of the fire, licking grease from glossy paws. Never did ask you your name, said the FurKnight. Dill. It's just Dill. How much longer would this charade have to last? How much longer would he have to hold back? He could simply call upon the fire, be gone in an instant, burning the last of his bridges, and leaving everyone else on the other side. Brer had always said patience paid double, but she was gone now, and her advice hadn't saved either of them. Still, he was pretty sure this fool wouldn't lay a hand on him. Time was on his side. He nodded to himself, choosing patience. The shiv, said Dill. Felix's ears poised. You seemed tense. Felix scrunched his face, stood, then looked up at the canopy, as if the answer hung above them. You know what a meritocracy is? Dill raised an eyebrow. It was a big word for a moron. Well, the shiv ain't that, said Felix. They ride big horses, but they ain't ever shoveled our stable. They live in big houses, but they ain't ever earned a piece of silver between them. We're less than them, but for no apparent reason that I can see. He dislikes the aristocracy. How quaint. Dill inspected a claw. All those riches mean nothing out here. They cannot dry the wet. The FurKnight walked to one of the hollow windows and looked out at the falling rain. Dill could have easily choked him there and then, rushed him from behind and put his weight into it, but it would have been a gamble. They weren't entirely alone. His eyes wandered to the lump, this fair weather. The big dog was an unknown. Felix's big ears, usually fluffy, wide and attentive, had turned flat. Dill was confused. Didn't knights usually kill sorcerers? This one seemed so keen on keeping him alive. You lied for me? I lied, because it was in our best interest. Interesting. He was a sly one, this FurKnight, and it occurred to Dill that he knew very little of their breed. Nothing more than he had overheard, and about as much as he knew about himself. They appeared to be physically the same, but that was where the comparison ended. Still, their origin was of interest. Where did you come from? Where were you born? Felix only scratched his head, so Dill pushed further. Do you not know? I guess it's a secret, said Felix. I've asked, but all I was ever told was, when a hero dies, a FurKnight will arise. Nothing you can chew on. You must know more. My earliest memories are of the Enclave, deep within Base by a citadel. It's the same for all of us. It's where I lived and trained for 5 years, so I guess that's where I came from. Useless. Dill kicked the embers at the edge of the fire. They took flight before pirouetting to the ground. And what about you? Asked Felix, his mouth disappearing under a heavy beard. Where were you born? My origin, Dill snorted. It started in the north, in Nahrsea, but my past burned to ashes in that damn inn. He looked into the fire, unable to blink away the face of Brer in the flames. She should have never been there, never tried to talk the miners down. She had died because he had failed to protect her, because the FurKnight had failed to do his job. Why did you intervene? Said Dill. Why did you put your neck on the line if you couldn't save her? He balled his fists, and the warmth of the fire swelled in his chest. I tried, I really did, said Felix. But every fight is such a risk, a real roll of the dice. You shouldn't have gotten involved. Felix raised his palms. Like I said, it's my duty. I swore an oath as one of the king's own. You're a fool and a hound. He throws and you fetch. It's cute that you might think otherwise. Felix dropped his shoulders and joined him, peering into the flames, his face lit orange and shadow. And why did you let me live? Spat Dill. Why didn't you just do your job? Breyer continued to look up at him. Her smile wilted at the sides, and her black eyes no longer blue. It wasn't the first time he had let her down, but it would surely be the last. An emptiness competed for space in his chest, and the fire burned hotter to consume it. You'd already lost so much, said Felix. And what would you know of loss, of hurt? You're as fresh as a pup and as dumb as one too. You killed her, FurKnight, with your bravery and your stupidity. You let her down and she is never coming back. The fire pulsed a jet of blue, its crackles and breath menacing against the storm above. Felix met his gaze. You're right. I've never had much of a family, so what could I possibly know? My training was tough and judgmental. 5 years of torment with nobody in my corner. No one like your Breyer. Fairweather wandered behind him, and Felix ran a paw through his yellow fur. But the truth is, you're blinded by this pain. I didn't kill her, Dill. She went down fighting. Fighting. To protect you. Dill let the fire's heat fill his heart, and reached out to twist the flames with unseen hands. They fizzled and fractured, spat blue and gold, elongated by his will. Felix stumbled back, his paws raised as Dill's anger manifested before them. The power was sweet. No more emptiness, no more longing, just flame. Laughter echoed in his ear, a hiss and a crack, yet Felix's words still edged his mind. To protect you. He couldn't push them down, couldn't burn them away. His paws shook as his grip on the flame weakened, so he threw the fire into the evergreen. A moment later they were joined by ash and rain, smothering the fire and killing the conversation. A sickness remained in his chest and stomach, and when he looked across at the FurKnight, he found himself angered by his image. The gods had performed some kind of sick trick pairing him with a creature that looked so much like, that had the same hair as, well, that was the past, and he wouldn't invite any more pain. He swallowed a lump in his throat and turned to find a window of his own. The noise of the rain filled his mind, and when he closed his eyes he found the black centre of his thoughts. Time stretched out before him, so much so that when a sharp pain pinched him in the neck, he was unsure how long had passed. He raised a paw and felt the rough bristles of feathers. A little something from my sneaking pouch, shouted Felix, barely audible over the weather's white noise. He was standing with his paws on his hips and a blowpipe in his hand. Dill tried to walk, but dropped to his knees, his legs a distant memory. What have you done? Learned my lesson, chuckled Felix. This way I don't need to keep watching my back no more, and it hurts a whole lot less than a bore to the head. Dill's vision and thoughts faded to black. Genius. The rain had subsided and was barely visible in the grey sky, the beginning of the end of their journey. Felix had bound, gagged and hog-tied the sorcerer to Fairweather, hoping to reduce the chance of being burnt to death to near zero. Whilst it was regrettable, it was far less risky this way. His stomach growled at him. There were so many questions left unanswered. The sorcerer's sadness seemed to run deeper than he could imagine, eclipsing even his own hurts and regrets. Still, Dill would be judged, have his actions weighed and, with the help of Felix's account, be found innocent. Things would be okay. He patted his belly. Don't worry, Tommy. Life begins soon. Having checked the packs, the food and the gold, his paw fell to the hilt of his sword. The blade shone into view, mirror bright and brilliant even in the winter's murk. He squinted and saw several etched markings along its length, square drawings made of geometric shapes. It was so damn inconvenient that they had stumbled into that ruin. The sword was another detail he would have to keep hidden, another secret he would have to keep safe. He sighed. Be brave, and move forwards, I suppose.